Well, hello everyone, and it's great to be back here. This is Oscar Joffrey, co-founder, president, and CEO of KoreConX, the world's first only-one issuance platform to help you tokenize your securities or offer your security token offering on a global in a global marketplace. KoreConX today is helping companies manage all of this through our all-in-one platform to help you manage your shareholders, your cap table management, your corporate records, and of course the entire life cycle of that security token that you've issued or tokenized security. Today we're going to talk about with Dr. Kiran Garimella. Thank you for joining me today once again.
Absolutely, Oscar. I'm glad to be here. This is very exciting. We have our own KoreToken protocol, and we have such a wonderfully structured process. It's very thoughtful, very comprehensive. So let's do it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you and I do a lot of calls with people, and we really want to make it as smooth as possible. So Dr. Kiran and I got together and we say, look, instead of us, it's easy for us to give you this information so you can watch it at your leisure to understand what is the process of going through using KoreConX to design, develop, and launch your security token protocol or your tokenized security. So let's get started with that. With KoreConX. And, obviously, we always say this, if you have any questions, we're easy to reach. You can find us on the web. You can find us in a number of places in the marketplace. So let's get started. The onboarding process at KoreConX is quite simple. You simply go to www.koreconx.io and you begin the registration process. You register yourself as an individual first for your company. Your second step would be that you would register your company that you would like to either issue a security token or tokenize the securities that you have already issued. And then step number 3 is where you would go to in our deal room to be able to begin the process. You would be able to, at that moment, fill out the application form, answer a number of questions, and of course, pay the one-time fee that we have within our platform. That then begins the second step in the process where you are now getting into the process of designing and development of your security token for your company. And of course, once that's all completed, we move into the portion of course, testing it and getting it ready to deploy and making sure that it's being properly managed. And voila, we're live. But I just gave you the high-level overview. It's an 8-step process, and we just want to make it as easy as possible and cost-effective for you to make sure that the reality of this is just we're tokenizing securities, making sure that you issue a globally compliant security token in as many different countries as you like. But you need to understand what that requires, and hopefully through this process today that Dr. Kiran and I are going to go through with you will help you understand what you need to prepare yourself for. Because one thing is saying that you're going to issue a globally security token offering. Another thing is, hey, how do I do it? What do I need? And what do I need to do to have myself prepared for that? So Dr. Kiran and I are going to go through that in a bit of detail for you to help you. So the parts we're going to go through in the design and development are laid out here. Dr. Kiran, why don't you get the thing started, because you're dealing with the issuers right now, the ones that were already tokenizing their securities or helping them do their security token offering. Why don't you walk us through the first few steps?
Absolutely. One of the big ahas that I've seen come from the issuers we talk to is that they think a security token is something they can simply register and say, click the button and it'll automatically happen. But we walk through a very structured process where we say, it's not just simply the issuance and some odd trading on a security token. It's more than that. There's a whole life cycle behind it. So we try to make this process very simple, yet it's pretty comprehensive, right? Because throughout the entire life cycle of the token, we want to make sure that it is, in fact, manageable. So the structure that you see here is the complete development process where we say, how do you want to structure your token? What does your company even look like? And then what are the reporting requirements? What are different types of secondary trading? How do you want to do that? Are there any restrictions that you want to place? And of course, depending on the jurisdiction and the exemptions that the issuers pick, there will be some automatic disclosures and reporting and legal things that will come mandatory. There are others that are pretty optional, and that's where issuers need to understand, what are the various exit conditions and the rights of token holders, and what type of participation they can put into place, right? So then that takes us into rest of those blocks of information that we collect. And after we collect all this, obviously, we will be creating the prototype just to make sure everything is fine. And we do some extensive testing and then go to a full production launch based on that.
It's interesting. As you were going through that, it goes in the back of my mind sometimes. People think that a token is just something just for trading, and it's ID verification, AML, and really that's not what a security token is. In particular, the core token isn't. It involves basically, in the most basic sense, the way I tell it to people, when you do a traditional capital raise, you often create a term sheet, a subscription agreement that investors agree to for this investment. Now imagine that tokenized. And that's all these different questions that you're laying out here. People don't even realize all of this is in those documents. It's just that, for many times we take it for granted because, investors are only investing in a company in this country. In other countries, people tend not to go beyond that. But now with tokenization, we're looking at a broader scale. But it doesn't change the fundamentals, which is there's going to be a term sheet that lays out all the exact terms that the company is going to sell this offering to. And then, of course, the subscription agreement the shareholder signs. But now it's tokenized, and that tokenization gives a visualization that's immutable. That's the power of it, and of course the tradability element that it will offer. So let's go into some of the in-depth elements of it, as Dr. Kiran's laid out here. It's 16 items, but this is just high level. But one of the things companies really need to understand is, where are you domiciled? Domicile is, where's your company operate? Where is it incorporated? Where do you do the vast majority of your business and your employees are in? And of course, that jurisdiction dictates how you can sell securities in your companies. So, if you're based in the United States, you need to understand what exemptions are available to you in order to make sure that you comply, whether you're from Canada, the UK, whether Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, anywhere in the world. It's important to make sure that our protocol takes that in consideration, in understanding that based on where you're from and how you use certain exemptions, the rules that are laid out are how they're going to affect you. And I think this is an important part of the exercise that, up until now, people, freely just think, I want to sell it everywhere. Well, you can, but you obviously need to follow a number of restrictions in order to make sure that you deal with it properly. Dr. Kiran, did you have anything to add to that?
Except that, as a technologist, as I go and look at how all of this architecture and design is coming together, I'm amazed by the complexity of regulation, both for securities and for corporate law. So, for example, in the United States, we have individual states and blue sky laws. And in Canada, the 13 provinces, they all behave very differently in many, many ways. And this is actually even true in places, in the rest of the world, right? Even the definitions of accredited investors, all those things change. And to be a fully globally compliant token, we do have to take a lot of those into consideration, right? So it's very eye-opening for the issuers to realize that, they just simply can't say, oh, we'll sell it to all investors all over the planet. No, they have to really understand what that actually means.
No, agreed. And that's a very important first step. And I know it's a big one, and we're talking a lot about it because some people say, well, listen, I'll go incorporate in Malta or Gibraltar or Switzerland. It's more friendly. Well, there's no such thing as anything friendly, because when you're selling securities, you have to apply the rules in which where you're selling to. So you really need to have a securities lawyer guiding your company to make sure you understand all this. And if you do it wrong, it can be very costly for your company, as we're currently seeing with certain regulators making arrests and sanctions and so forth. So always remember, doing it globally compliant is a better way than the other way. All right. So obviously, once you pick your jurisdiction and the jurisdiction you comply and where you want to sell your securities, you may have some reporting requirements as an issuer. This is misunderstood by most people. What is a reporting requirement? Well, every country has a different rule for that. And again, this is very important for you to know. So when you're designing our security token with KoreConX, we require you to have a securities lawyer within the country where you're from. And then, of course, if you want to sell securities in other countries, we will be more than happy to introduce you to the lawyers in our in our ecosystem, our core partners, to make sure you understand what the rules are. The token will have it. The security token protocol we provide you for your company will have that, but you need to make sure you understand. It could be you may have to do reporting before you issue your securities or begin the capital raise, or you may have to do one after. And then, of course, what are your ongoing obligations? So in one country, it may be every 6 months. The other one may be every month, 6 months, or once a year. So you need to be aware of that, because you want to make sure, as an issuer company, you meet your obligations to your shareholders when you issue. And you can add additional reporting. You may voluntarily want to say, you know what, even though I'm only required to do it once a year or once every 6 months, I'm going to provide a report to my shareholders once every 30 days. That's fantastic. Being transparent is going to help you for your shareholders for secondary market trading anyway. And with technology, Dr. Kiran, I mean, that's one of the true benefits of that we can create triggers for them, notifications, to make sure they get this done.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, I've heard back from some people saying that the more transparent the company is, the better valuations it gets when it's time to do mergers and acquisitions, as you know.
Yes, of course. I mean, it goes without saying. I mean, tokenization comes with a big responsibility. You need to be transparent. You need to be putting your financial information out there. And that's never been available out there before. We don't have a central repository for the market at large to view this information. KoreConX is with its global private company data repository, which will be available to the global marketplace to be able to come and see companies that have tokenized their securities and want to do ongoing public disclosures. That's going to assist them for their shareholders to be able to have some form of liquidity or exit, as you said. So this is an important.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's more responsibility, but with the right technology, it doesn't mean more work, obviously.
Well, that's just it, right? People often think, it's one more thing I don't want to do. And I don't think you realize that you're already doing already. We just want to make it sure it's simple, using the KoreConX all-in-one platform. You have the mechanism to be able to have the information there and be able to send it out to all your holders. Now, the next question, the next item on here is one that, it needs a bit of clarity within people in the market. What is the difference of doing the two different offering types?
I mean, a lot of that is, based on the exemptions that the issuers will pick, right? So can they do a direct offering, or can they do a broker dealer led offering? Do they want to put, bring in only accredited investors, or would it be the general public? And I think what we're finding, of course, is that many issuers are saying, we want to start with a broker dealer led offering for accredited investors, and somewhere down the road, we want to do a larger public offering. So I think that's a good process and plan that people have. But they really need to understand. And this is kind of where we get in and say, okay, in different jurisdictions, you're going to be doing, let's say, broker, dealer-led offering. Then in our ecosystem, we obviously have partnerships and relationships that we can introduce people, right? So all of that is, something that we want to obviously design into the token itself, because once that gets into the flow of transactions, we'd have to get the right parties involved for validating different types of transactions from a technological standpoint.
No, that's correct. I mean, I've been torn by this because obviously as an entrepreneur, I feel that we should be able to do things in the most cost-effective manner as possible. But at the same time, I have to look back at what's happened the last 2 years in the marketplace. I'm not here to. I love tokenization, and I believe in the merits of it that it brings to the private capital markets. But I also understand how investors feel right now. You know, when $30 billion have been lost, and so much fraud, there's no trust out there. So companies who are trying to do their own offering on their own website, the question then begs from the investor is, who's doing the due diligence in your company? Who's vetted you in? And that's what broker dealers bring into this. They're required by securities law to do a due diligence of the company, to make sure that the company's real, that there is a real plan behind it. They're not there to dictate whether the company will be successful, or they're there to meet all the requirements and make sure that the investor is suitable for that investment. And I think this is my personal opinion, of course, but I hope more companies see it that way. We need to build trust with investors today.
Absolutely. And with all, I was going to say that with all the intermediaries, that are there in the marketplace, our goal is not to disintermediate all of that necessarily, but to make it much more efficient. The whole process has to be much more efficient.
Of course. And you'll recall that meeting we had with all the advisors and partners when we came together and we were discussing, what happened in the last couple of years? What can KoreConX be that's very different in the marketplace? And you remember when the number one item that came out, and it's now part of our governance standards at KoreConX with our protocol, is investor protection, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So the only way we can protect investors is to make sure that companies are properly vetted in. I'm not saying that companies cannot do it without a broker-dealer. So there are companies in our ecosystem, in particular in the United States, where you can actually buy a third-party due diligence report, and you can use that. So there are ways to make sure that you bring that confidence back, but we all need to be aware that we are all going to be paying a price for what happened the last couple of years. Even though our companies are going to be real, we all need to be aware of the mentality within the marketplace. So we just want to make sure that we want to empower the ecosystem that currently exists. There are thousands of broker-dealers worldwide. And of course, broker-dealers have a place in this ecosystem, and they perform their compliance requirements to make sure that we as companies are protected when we get that. And of course, in different jurisdictions, you may even be required to do so as the only means to be able to sell your securities in your company. And of course, one of the big things that comes up, whether you do it yourself or through the broker dealer, we get asked, is the only thing I need to worry about is investor ID and KYC and that's it. And the answer is no. The answer is no, not even close. Regardless whether you are using a broker dealer or on your own, there is a number of things you need to collect from a potential investor: ID verification, AML, potential suitability. Of course, in the United States, you even have to go for investor verification. So, that's a lot of compliance work. And again, you're more than happy to, there are tools you can bring in to do it yourself and so forth. But again, you have to make sure that it meets our requirements. And as well, you cannot exclude in the United States the big one, the bad actor check, which,
that's right.
If you miss that one, one you're going to put on the list yourself.
Absolutely. And it's not just investor protections for the investors. It's also for the issuers and anybody else in the mix as well, right?
It is. It's after market trading. When the trading, you got to make sure that you're getting the right people based on your securities, making sure you've got all that information, because ultimately that puts all the risk back in the company again. So all of that gets embedded into your core token. It's part of the protocol requirements. And of course, right, we talked about the reporting restrictions in advance. Now we're talking about the reporting requirements after the offering is done with the company. And again, there are those that you may have to meet because of the regulatory, but as well, you can do them voluntarily. And I always encourage people to be more voluntarily. So tokenizing your securities comes with a responsibility, because now you want secondary market trading for your investors, which is great. We all want that. I want that. But in order for that to occur, we need to be able to provide our information very much like publicly traded companies. But we need to have the discipline to do it, and we need to
Yes.
do it in a compliant manner. And of course, we've never had a centralized place to manage it until now with KoreConX. But the point is, you need to be aware that these reporting requirements do exist for your companies and for yourselves. And it could even be reporting requirements by investors, intermediaries, broker dealers. But you need to make sure you are aware of all the different pieces, because we live in a world now as entrepreneurs that we can't just rely on saying, hey, I have a lawyer that does that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, but that lawyer he's external to your business. You're the one running the company day to day. You're the one that's managing the shareholders. So you need to understand your regulatory obligations from an ongoing basis. And of course, this is the holy grail. What we all want is that you do all these wonderful things, you properly constructed it. We get into the secondary market trading, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. The one thing I do want to add on the reporting is that we collect so much data and it's all on the blockchain. So it's immutable, it's well recorded and verified. So if there are, there are the mandatory requirements for reporting, as you rightly pointed out, but there are also reporting and disclosures that we might have to make, or the issuer has to make for regulatory actions or any legal challenges. And so there is good, solid proof about all the actions that the issuer took in sending notifications and communications to investors. So all of that is really part of the entire strategy.
Of course, and that helps for the secondary trading requirements. So
Absolutely.
the secondary trading requirements, our core token protocol today is supported by 4 secondary markets, and more are appearing worldwide. So this is exciting. It's exciting for all of us worldwide to be able to offer that to our shareholders, to be able to have the opportunity to potentially have liquidity, but comes with a responsibility, as Dr. Kiran just mentioned, that you need to be able to be doing your reporting and be compliant, but as well, in order to make sure that you are approved for a secondary trading, it's not enough just to issue the protocol. You as a company need to be able to comply with their requirements. Why?
That's
Because secondary market trading platforms are regulated.
Yes.
So we are now in a regulated world, which is fantastic because we're bringing investor protection. So
Absolutely.
Exactly, right? So the ATS platforms, secondary dairy market platforms are regulated by regulators. The broker dealers are regulated by regulators. We as companies are regulated by regulators by doing our reporting. So therefore, what we're telling investors is this: look, there's always going to be a risk with any venture. That's been going on since venture capital and risk investment started. But what we don't want to be is, that type of world that occurred a couple years back or last year where, people took it and ran. No, this is about real companies with real opportunities. And yes, some may succeed, some may not, but at least this is so companies that are going to secondary trading will have to go through the process of applying. Of course, it'll be a lot very simple with KoreConX. You'll still need to be approved by a secondary operator to make sure that your securities can trade in their secondary market. And once it does, and the trading restrictions have been removed for your holders, voila, they have the option to trade, which is exciting, right?
Oh no, absolutely exciting part. So yeah, I mean, all this, the trading, we put in so many rules and checks and controls. I mean, the last thing investors want, I mean, they have their work cut out to look at the business plans and protect their capital. What they don't want is technology risk on top of that, right? So in our chain, obviously we don't have forking. We don't insist that people must memorize all their private keys. If they lose all that stuff, they have lost their money. No, we don't have any of those issues. And so the protocol is very robust. And from the get-go, right, Oscar, we always have talked about safety and security and investor protection all the time, right?
And so agreed. And obviously the protection comes with, because the rules are there, and then obviously when you're trading, we're now protecting the company to make sure that nothing is happening on an illegal basis. Somebody trying to trade, the token will protect the company to make sure that it only trades when it does. But not only that, we will give you other things to consider. So obviously every country's got trading restrictions depending on what regulations you use in order to raise your capital. As you know, in Reg D level in the United States, it's got a 12-month mandatory hold. Canada's got a 4-month hold. UK 4, Australia 6 months. So as you can see, it can be very complicated, but you need to decide what your overall arching trading restrictions will be. But we've also, as we are designing more security tokens, clients are getting very creative. They're starting to realize that maybe we should add additional trading restrictions beyond what the regulators, and that's the great thing about this. So often that's done when you provide somebody a term sheet. You're saying, okay, these securities will be done this way. You could only sell after these period of months and this percentage and all that. Now you can add that into the KoreToken Security Token protocol, and it gets embedded. It's immutable. It's right there, never be to be tampered with. David Wield, who is one of our advisors, had a great speech at our Core Summit in New York in October 2018. And what was really great about his keynote was that he was talking about how liquidity could actually happen in secondary market, which was one part. The second part is that he was saying, even though liquidity is great, we as private companies need to understand the implications of that. So some examples of that would be, what if somebody bought 20% or 10% of all your security tokens during your offering?
Yes.
After a year, your offering is 10 times what it was, but all of a sudden this individual is not happy with you for whatever reason, and all of a sudden wants to dump it. And as long as they get their money back in a little bit, they're happy, therefore affecting the value of your overall company when you're going through an M&A. So you need to construct all the other elements. You need to think of your exit. You need to think of where you're going with your company. Where's the final goal? Are you going to be acquired? Are you going to go in public? Or are you going to just remain privately held company? But again, you just need to think of these things, and we remind you of them when you're designing your security token to ensure that what you put out is exactly what you sold or your investors invested in.
Absolutely.
And of course,
yep. And this is all about planning ahead for exits too, right? There are so many events that can happen, right? It's a buyout, it's a merger, it's a dissolution for some reason, right? So people may not want to think about it, but they have to think about how can I design my structure today? And of course, Oscar, as you know, there's a lot of flexibility in our technology and the KoreToken protocol that these things can be dynamically added later to the contract, and it can be updated dynamically. So all of that flexibility exists.
That's right. And I mean, the last week or so, I have to tell you, I've spoken with so many companies, and I ask them, so what's the exit strategy? And they go, what do you mean? Well, what's the end goal? I mean, are you planning on being acquired? So we're putting those big questions out there, because if you haven't thought of them, we're going to give you all these different ways to make sure. And what people don't realize is that when you do a traditional capital raise, that's usually covered in the term sheet and the subscription agreement and a number of things. So investors need to know what they're getting into, right? So that's the important thing that that's happening right now. So so it's great to see that we're getting people to think about their exit strategy, and it doesn't mean they have to do it. It just means that they're now putting these considerations in place, and it's all tied into the next area that we have here, the rights and restrictions. So I know people think that everything we covered, well, Oscar, isn't everything we covered all their rights and everything? Not really. The rights of a token holder varies based on how you want to structure your company, your offering, and everything. Things could be, do you want to give them voting and not voting, right?
Yes. Yes.
Do you want to, what kind of restrictions do you want to offer them, that they do get financial statements or they don't, or they get right of first refusal?
That's right.
What happens on exit strategy? All of these things that do not go away, but they need to be embedded and in the token to ensure that the new buyer, in particular the new buyer on trading, understands it, but also the current security token holder has a good understanding of what their rights are and what they really purchased in your company. They get to visualize that. I mean,
Exactly.
that from my point of view, I love it because there's nothing worse than getting investors to come into your company and to be able to invest, and then later on, a year later, contacting you saying, "Hey, what are my rights again? Do I have to is there an AGM coming up, or do I have voting or non-voting?" I
Exactly.
can't tell you how many times that's happened, but it's part of a learning experience. But all of this will now be in their token with your company's symbol, of course, and all that. But again, we're taking all that documentation that's filtered in 100 pages and visualizing it to investors, and it's immutable, as Dr. Kiran has mentioned it over and over again. That immutability is what makes this security token protocol so exciting and so powerful with companies. And obviously, that comes with some other perks, right?
Oh, absolutely, right. All token holders, may be able to participate in some way financially, not just from capital appreciation, but in terms of dividends and revenue share and so on. And so we just want to make sure we cover that complete ground as well.
And of course, the revenue share and dividends, it can be very complex.
Exactly.
Some of the modeling that I've seen some people do, it's amazing. But that once it gets embedded in, it's inside, and the investor can rest assured that's exactly what they're supposed to be receiving from the company. The next item, people never think of this, but it's amazing. We deal with it every day here at KoreConX every single day. We deal with companies saying, "Oh my God, I just invested $5,000 in this company. I didn't realize it, but I want to transfer it actually to my son, or my wife, or oh, you know what? It was supposed to be a joint owner,
Yes.
right? So
Exactly.
and in some countries, you can have not just one person as a joint owner, you can have unlimited joint owners. So it can be very complex. You need to cover all these things, transfer requirements, beneficiary owner. People, again, why would you want to have these things? Because this is a security in your company.
Yes.
You need to make sure that the security token holder, your new shareholder, understands their rights, and you need to make sure that if anything ever happens to them, there are rules in place in order to protect you as a company. Because the last thing you want, somebody who owns 25% of all your security tokens, and you have no clause for beneficiary owner. If something happens or anything like that, they could immediately demand cashing out from your company, and that could cause you a number of issues. So all of these are for the protection of the investor and the protection of you as an individual company in the marketplace.
And of course, the situation might get complicated when these are traded, and the new owner will have to reapply these new beneficiaries, and are these rights and restrictions still transferable to the new owners or not? I mean, all of those things we would have to look at too.
Without a doubt. I mean, it's amazing what happens afterwards. And you're right. When you had Dr. Graham, thank you for bringing that up. That's one that people have never even thought of. What happens after the secondary trading? People just think it's trades, but you're right. It just adds to the complexity of it in the component of managing this. And of course, there's other things you can add. I mean, we certainly can't anticipate everything you want, but I guess what we're saying to you today is this. Our security token protocol at KoreConX is there to make sure that whatever form of security you want to do, whether it's equity, debt, convertible debenture, a bond, a real estate asset, whatever that security is, and whatever the attributes of that security, whatever the items are in your term sheet, in your subscription agreement, all those things, or shareholders agreement, all those things and rights are embedded in your token. and you can have unlimited of those tokens, of course, and then issue it to your shareholders. That's really what we're talking about here. So we give you a lot of different things to think about, because the more things you can add to it, you can start planning for the future. Like, have you thought of maybe what would happen if you do another capital raise?
Exactly.
Right? That's something to consider, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And throughout this entire thread, the whole question of who gets access to what types of information is very critical, right? We have a very, very strong what we call information rights management throughout this. And Oscar, you brought up an excellent example earlier where we get so many calls from investors and other people saying, when is an AGM? What are my rights? When is the dividend going to be issued? How much is the dividend? Et cetera, right? And all of those things, people can now look it up in their dashboard because all of that is coded into the contract.
That's right. It is the most painful thing to do before, obviously, tokenization. Until you live it, until you do it, you really don't appreciate the true value of blockchain technology and what it's capable of doing in the private capital markets until you've gone through it. So obviously, everything we've been talking about is, putting all these things into place. The information access, what the rights are, all the partners who will gain access to this information on an ongoing basis. Obviously, our number one goal, our number one standard at KoreConX, our governance standard, is investor protection. Of course, as an investor of the company, you have privacy rights. Your information will never be out on a public ledger and available to anybody. But as a company, they may need to share certain information, but you always know that it's in a secured environment and with trusted nodes. So that's an important element of our infrastructure and our security token protocol.
Yeah, so, no doubt about it. And all this information, right, it kind of automatically leads into the complete development and testing. And one of the things that, I think we really should point out is as people go through their capital raise, as they're offering, they're getting feedback from broker dealers, from lawyers, from investors, right? Some of the big critical investors, right? And they too will have a role in shaping what the contract ought to look like, right? So for example, they might say, oh, we don't like this restriction. Can we modify that, or can you help us? So there is a continual tweaking possibly as the offering is going through. So we have to take that into account, right? We just can't say, oh, we started an offering, let's release a token right now. It doesn't quite work as simple as that.
Agreed. I'm glad you brought that up because I almost forgot about it. We deal with it so often, reminding people of that. Obviously, for companies that already completed their offering, it's very simple to tokenize your securities because it's already closed, right? So the terms are laid out, that's easy. But as Dr. Kiran laid out, for those who are just starting your capital raise, of course, we'll begin the process with you and we start making the design, but like anything else, when we were doing our security token, what we started with, and as he just alluded to, as you start going through the process with the investors, you start modifying the terms and conditions and your term sheet to make sure that it meets, it's something that they want to invest in based on their requirements. And that is what becomes your final core contract embedded in your token to be issued to your investors.
Absolutely. And of course, all of this testing and all is very, very rigorous. I mean, we do an extensive and exhaustive set of tests which are automated. We do Monte Carlo simulations on all these things. And, we also have things like, audits and certifications. We go through an entire launch readiness cycle that, we're looking at. But the one thought that I did want to put out there, and I've been in the technology space for almost 3 decades now, and
not long, huh?
Seriously, I know it sounds like.
I don't want to tell anybody I've been in 3 decades, but it just shows how long we've been in the technology sector.
Yeah, that's right. But I tell you, big companies, small companies, doesn't matter, right? When we as technologists, right, engage with our clients, the requirement sessions, the gathering and the design sessions we go through, they prompt so much thought from the clients. People think that issuers, clients just know exactly what they want and they can come and tell us what they want exactly. It doesn't quite happen like that. And the entire process that we have put together here is designed to make our clients, our issuers, think through the complete implications of their security token offering, because as we point out, just the offering and some trading is not the be all and end all. There's a whole world outside of that, right?
Oh yeah, it's no, so true. Obviously, the more prepared companies are, that the design process goes very quickly. But I guess what we're telling you here today is that we're very agile, we're very flexible. We're not trying to shove you in a time zone. We're there to work with you. For the first, 500 companies that are going to go through our design security token protocol, Dr. Kiran himself personally will be speaking to each of you to design your security token. And of course, that token will be embedded with our core contract with artificial intelligence that is really going to show you the power of all of that together. And of course, the final stages of the protocol are
or basically, when once we have done all of the testing, we've looked at all the test cases, all the ways that things can fail. We're very, very particular about stuff like that. We want to manage our risk very carefully, right? But once we go through all of that, and we'll have some areas where there will be some independent certification about the quality of the code and so on, right? But once all that's done, it's now time to plan and get ready for the launch itself. And that includes not just IT and technology, but it also includes marketing and everything that issuers have to do to put press releases, notices out there, let people know in social media, different areas. How do you get to that? How do you assign and distribute all these tokens, deploy them? We want to make it as orderly and transparent to everyone as possible.
No, that's true. And then one thing I should mention is that because there are two different ways companies are coming to KoreConX today to use our security token protocol. So we have a vast majority of clients who already raised their money. And of course, once you've done that and we get your token ready and we have your permission, of course, we would never do this without your permission. We do a public announcement. For companies who are doing security token offerings, we're more than happy to start letting the market know, but we're very sensitive to the fact that you need to make sure you got all your regulatory filings in order to make sure we make the market aware. We encourage you to tell the market that you are using our protocol in order to instill investor confidence. That doesn't stop it. And of course, you will have our full support from KoreConX, our core partners around the world, and of course, all our offices to make sure that everybody becomes aware of your company. And for us, because we want your success to be as fruitful, we want to make sure that you do it in the most compliant manner as possible to have a successful security token offering. And of course, the happy day is launch day. And the launch day, that could be the day that all your security token holders receive their token, or the day when your offering goes live and you begin raising your capital. But I do want to stress this, that you can start the process of getting your security token set up while you're doing your capital raise. You don't need to have your security token ready while you're doing the capital. You can be doing both at the same time. But getting started is the first key. And today it's very simple, www.koreconx.io. Step 1, register. Use your company email address and your name, first and last name. Number 2, register your company. Tell us all the details about the legal entity, where you're from. And step number 3, go into the deal room. Click on Create Security Token and go through the 4-step process to get it started. And then number 4, begin the security token, meaning start getting the process of creating it and launching it. And as always, I've said in all our videos and we're very easy to find, but just in case, you can find myself, Oscar Joffrey, on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Reach out if you have any questions. More than happy to answer them, give you a demonstration. If you want to as well, Dr. Kiran Garimella, LinkedIn, Facebook, these are all the different places. Please visit our blog. We do a lot of writing there. We have it on Medium. Our goal is to make sure that you have a full understanding, not only what a security token is, what the whole ecosystem looks like, and what its benefits to you. And we hope that today We're giving you a bit of insight how to get started with KoreConX in designing, development, and of course, launching your security token for your company. Have a great time, and we look forward to seeing you soon.